Hello and welcome to another video. In the last video, we were talking about units, conversion, and the third thing that I had mentioned was estimation. Let's talk about estimation and approximation. Okay, let's see what the meaning is. Estimation, it says, is when we estimate answers, we do so by calculation, not by guessing. Okay, to calculate an estimate, we first approximate values by rounding them off to a certain degree of accuracy, and then we use the rounded values to do the calculation. Okay. Estimation is an important skill. You will be asked about this on paper one. You will not always be able to measure things accurately. For example, if you're catering for a large number of people, you will have to estimate the amount of food and drink you need to supply. Using the symbol is approximately equals to something like that. You can see it in a lot of places on your calculators and otherwise too. We can say that 7.73 into 2.07 is basically 8 into 2. Okay, so that's your how you are approximating. 7.73 is close to 8 and 2.07 is close to 2. The answer may not be 16 precisely, but I can tell you that the answer is going to be reasonably close to 16. Okay, it's you can see later on that the actual calculation gives you 16.0011. However, it will not be reasonable to round both numbers to the nearest 10 because we would then have 7.73 rounded off to 10 and 2 rounded off to 0. So that's 10 into 0 is 0, and that's not an actual answer. Okay, let's try doing these and let's see which should be the correct answer. This will round off to 7 and this will round off to 10. So that should be 70. And I think the closest answer that I have is 70.56. Okay, this will round off to 2 and I can actually round out off to 60. About 120. It's not exactly 120. The closest answer that I have is 118.958. Okay, so these are just practice questions for you. You won't see them on the actual exam. You might be asked to do this on the actual exam. So what we're doing is we're just picking out numbers. So that rounds off to approximately 23, let's say, and this rounds off to 20. So it's 23 into 20. Okay, that will require a bit of calculation. Let's see. 23 into 2 is 46. So about 460. There's no answer that's 460, but this one is the closest, right? Now that one's a little tough. If I just round one of these numbers and say that, let's round off that off to 320 and let's round that off to 100. Okay. So that should give you 32,000. What is the answer that's closest? That's 33,000. Okay, and I think that's the right answer. Okay, that should round off to 0.1. Okay, so that's 6 into 0.1. The answer should be approximately 0.6. That should be the answer. Okay, 1200 into 1 will be 1200. Closest answer is 1068. Okay, that's just a small exercise to tell you what estimation is really about. You just rounding up numbers to come closest to the number that could give you an answer option. Okay, the root of 170. Now, how do I know what this is closest to? I want to round off to one significant figure. I haven't told you what significant figures are right now, so let's just keep that aside. Let's be just estimating root of 170. Okay, I know from my squares that 12 square is 144, 13 square is 169, and 14 square is 196. This falls closest to 169. So I can say that this should be approximately 13 should be the correct answer. If I round this off to one significant figure, it's going to become 10, but that's not what I want to do right now. Okay, let's look at this. Okay, root of 2000. Now we haven't done roots in detail right now, but can you break this up into root of 20 and root of 100? That's 10. Okay, now what's root of 20? I don't know root of 20, but 4 square is 16 and 5 square is 25. So this should be approximately somewhere between 4 and 5. Let's call that 4.5. Okay, so my answer should be 45. This is being multiplied. Sorry, this is being multiplied. Okay, so 45 square, let's estimate what that would actually give us. Let's put that on my calculator. Yeah, let's put that on my calculator and see. Okay, yeah, 45 into 45 gives you 2025, so that's the closest. For cube roots, if you remember, 4 cube is 64, that's closest. So you round this off to 4. Okay, that is what estimation means. Okay, approximation on the other side, on the other hand, is expressing a measurement or other value to a convenient or sensible degree of accuracy. Rounding is the process of writing a number to the stated degree of accuracy according to a rule. Okay, we'll learn about rounding of numbers, rounding up to one decimal place, two decimal place, and so on. Okay, degrees of accuracy could be, for example, to the nearest whole number, to the nearest meter, to a stated number of decimal places, or to a stated number of significant figures. The degree of accuracy that we use for rounding off depends on how accurate we wish our estimates to be. Okay, we'll talk about significant figures later on. Let's first learn a bit more about approximation right now. If there are exactly 12,873 people in a crowd at a cricket match, we can approximate this to the nearest thousand, as let's say 13,000 people. I can also say to the nearest 100 is 12,900, or to the nearest 10 is 12,870. Okay, so to round to the nearest 10, we can draw a number line marked in multiples of 10 and learn rounding off as well. Okay, so this number would round off to 120, this number would round off to 130. Similarly, this would also round off to 130, this would also round off. So it's the middle value that makes the difference. If it's greater than 5, it rounds off to the next number. If it's less than 5, it rounds off to the previous number. If it's exactly 5, it also rounds off to the greater number. Okay, now let's round these off to the nearest centimeter. That's 14.358, so that rounds off to 14 centimeters. 14.499 still rounds off to 14 centimeters. 15.099 rounds off to 15 centimeters. 15.5, that rounds off to 16 centimeters. And 16.5 rounds off to 17 centimeters. I'm rounding off to the nearest centimeter in this case. Okay. We can also round off to a number of decimal places. An athlete's 100-meter race time of 10.9321 seconds can be approximated to the nearest second as 11, to one decimal place as 10.9, to two decimal places as 10.93, and so on. Okay, to round off to one decimal place, we can draw a number line marked in multiples of zero point 0.1, so 7.0, 7.1, 7.2, and so on. Okay, let's see what this is asking us to do now. 2056 to the nearest 10. Now you have to realize what the nearest 10 means. For digits, this is the unit, this is tens, this is hundreds, this is thousands, 10,000s, and so on. Okay, the nearest 10, that's where I want to round off. Whenever you have to do this, what you simply do is you mark your digit that you want to round off to, and you draw a line after this. You decide whether the number after the line is greater than or less than 5. Since it's greater than 5, I'm going to add 1 and make this 0. So this is going to become 2060. That's to the nearest 10. To the nearest 100. If I'm marking to the nearest 100 now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this again. And now I'm going to shade the 100 and draw a line after that. Is the number after this line greater than 5? Yes. Or equals to 5. So you add 1 to it. And now the digits become 0. So that's 20,100. To the nearest 1,000. So you shade this. You decide whether this is greater than 1. No, it's not. So everything just becomes 0. 20,000. Nearest 1,000 is 20,000. To three decimal places. Where are three decimal places? That's where three decimal places are. So I round off here. I add 1 because this is greater than 5. So this becomes 3.110. Okay, I can just write 3.411. Okay, to two decimal places. Okay, that's what you do. Round off nothing, so this becomes 3.4100. You just write 3.41. To two decimal places, again 20.40. That's it. And now to the nearest whole number. So that's the nearest whole number. That's one is the nearest whole. One is the number that I'm looking at. Okay. So I mark it here. I decide whether this is less than or greater than one. There's nothing to add. So this becomes 351.000. That's the nearest whole number, which is 351. Okay. That was about estimation and rounding off. We're going to talk more about it. More about approximation and estimation later on. There are some past paper questions. Once I teach you more about significant numbers, significant figures is a relatively more complicated topic, so we'll do it in the next video. Thank you for watching.